So I pulled the bucket off of this thing and I'm hanging out here looking at all my bits and pieces, lubricating my brain a little. This is a quick attach plate or bracket, latch plate, I guess maybe they call it, from probably an MX series tractor's loader. The original bucket, and I've got a 5/16 quick attach plate here. That plate obviously has to be welded on the back of the bucket. Those brackets where the loader attaches are going to have to come off of there. And somehow those pads or plates are going to have to go onto my loader. It would almost fit if I were to drill out the holes in the arms and the cylinders to 30 millimeters. Those are 30 millimeter pins. But I don't need that center pipe right there, that rod, and it's super heavy. I'd like to get rid of that if I can. And I need to cut these plates off of the bucket anyway. Those have to go because that quick attach plate's going to be welded on the back of it. So I think the only reasonable thing for me to do here, other than get new pads that don't have all this junk on them, all the extra bracketry and stuff, would be to just cut all that off, that rod, these plates, cut everything off of the bucket, and then I'll just weld these bucket plates onto the quick attach. I don't need that center rod. It's really just there for some extra strength. It's unnecessary in this case. You're going to get a lot of strength from that quick attach just being attached to the implement, and it's got this pipe up here to hold those arms together. I don't think that's going to be necessary. So I've got my cheap little prime weld plasma cutter set up, and I'm going to just cut all that stuff off of there. Everything's going to come off of there, so we're going to be left with basically just these plates and the latch mechanism. And then obviously those brackets are going to have to come off the bucket. Well, I'm pretty sure you're not supposed to use a plasma cutter like a gouge, but that's basically what I did. I just blew out these welds with the plasma cutter. I did a pretty good job. So I'm going to beat those plates off there, or at least try, see how that goes, and keep going on the next bit. That worked out pretty well. I had to do a little bit of digging in with the cutoff wheel on the grinder just to finish those welds off, and then I was able to just beat them off with a hammer. That's how I handle something like that. I don't want to take too much of the metal out on the bucket or on the plates. I've got them set up over there by the loader in the position they came from. I don't want to take too much material off because I want that flat surface to be left as much as possible, especially on those, because I'm going to have to weld those onto the latch pads. So I try and just cut the weld as much as possible and then just separate it by beating the heck out of it with a hammer. So I'm going to get that side off and probably do some cleanup grinding. I got a little bit happy with the plasma cutter there, so I may want to fill those holes. We'll see if that's worth it, but probably not, considering I'm just going to weld a whole big plate on this whole thing. So next step is that one. Here's what I've got on this greasy horror show of a fab project. So I basically cut the ears off of that bucket. You saw that. I welded them onto, well, first I cut everything off of those quick attach pads. It's all right there. What a mess. That was horrible. I spent so much time cutting and grinding to get all that stuff off. 100% was not worth it. I should have just bought those pads. You can get them pretty cheap. The reason I did that with these is if I have issues with the spring, the lever, the hardware, that pin down there, that's all easily replaceable. It's stuff you can get from Kubota off the shelf. It's pretty easy to get. If I had some Chinese ones on there from eBay or Amazon or whatever, I'd have a hard time getting parts if something ever happened. But I probably wouldn't do it that way again. but it's done. I've got that on there and mocked up so that it fits this plate. This plate is what's going to go on the bucket. I drilled some holes in the bucket and put some clevises in there so I could hang it up from the shop crane there and move it around. So this plate is going to go on the bucket. That's mostly fitting well. I had to cut this angle right here so that it would fit on that plate, and that right there you can just barely see where the bolt hole for this pin goes, so I had to cut into that. I'm not too concerned about that. I may just weld those pins on anyway. There's no reason they can't be welded and then just cut off if that ever needs to come off, but I shouldn't have to ever take that thing off, and if I do, it's not a big deal to cut those welds. So I've got that on there. Next thing I need to do is test fit it on the forks that I have and make sure that it works before I go through and do all the finish welding and painting and lubing everything up. I got to clean those pins, and inside there those grease fittings are all messed up from the cutting torch, so those will have to be replaced. Before I do all that and finish welding it, I need to make sure that it works on the forks. Here are the forks that I got. These are just Land Pride 1,200 pound forks. I don't think that's going to be a problem because I'm not going to be lifting anything bigger than that anyway. I'll probably cut these off. I don't need them. I'm not going to be lifting anything tall enough that that's going to help with, and that'll reduce the weight just a little bit. Not going to do that soon, but at some point I'll probably do that. I also scored a sweet seat that's damaged, but that made it cheap. It's not going on this tractor. It'll probably go on another project. I'll get to that at some point. So I'm going to flip the tractor around and see if these forks will hook up. Got the forks on. I'm pleasantly surprised at how well they fit. It actually fits better than my cheap quick attach plate over there. So one of the things that I learned is that I thought I was going to need some clearance right here. So I thought I was going to have to cut that pin off and put that flag part on the inside, but I don't. I'm going to be able to do it like it was and put that flag bit on the outside, and it'll bolt on just fine. It's got enough clearance for the bolt. And then this bottom one, probably what I'll do is I'll just turn that and drill another bolt hole up here, so it'll be up here since I cut this off and that bottom one won't fit. Before I do the finish welding on those quick attach pads, I think it would be smart to go ahead and put the plate on the bucket. I'm not going to finish weld that either. I'll probably go through and do all the welding in one step, but I think I should at least attach that with some tack welds and make sure that it's going to work and it fits and it goes on and off well enough before I go and burn it on all the way. So I get the forks off, put that quick attach plate back on the loader, and then bring the bucket over and start matching it up. So I got it set up about where it's going to sit. I ground down this weld right here on the bucket so the plate would sit a little bit flatter. So I'm not going to try and get the bucket level to the plate or the pads on the loader. I'm just going to let the tractor sit level wherever it sits, which is probably not all that level. I'm just going to let it sit where it sits and then let the bucket be on the ground so that it's more or less level in the orientation where you're going to use it, or in the situation that you're going to use it. So the back of the bucket's pretty bent up. It's not going to sit flat, but for what I'm doing with this thing, it's not going to hurt anything. So I'm going to take some measurements, get it centered, and then I think I'll just tack it, and then I'll take it off, flip it over, and then at some point I'll cut some holes in the center of the plate so I can plug weld it in there. So that'll just help keep it from warping when I weld it all on there. There's plenty of material to weld on. It'll be all the way across the top on the bucket, across both sides, and then all the way across the bottom as well. So there's plenty of material to weld to. I lifted the loader up so that that quick attach plate is about in the same distance from the ground as the forks sit. So I just kind of matched that. It's going to be good enough for what we're doing. So I'll take some measurements, get it all centered up, and tack it. Before I start welding, I noticed there's some high spots in the back of the bucket. So I'm just going through with a piece of angle iron, and where I can see light, it's good. Where I can't see light, I just beat it with a 2.5 pound hammer to kind of beat that the high spots back, so that plate will fit a little bit better on there. Got the bucket all beaten up and it's set back where I want it. It's centered side to side. That plate definitely doesn't fit flat, but I'm not too concerned about that. I'll see what I can do to get it flat as I weld it. What I'm gonna do, we have that corner sitting against the bucket pretty well. And there's a gap up here on that top left corner. And then on this side, the top corner is sitting against the bucket, and the bottom corner is a little bit away from it. So what I'm going to do is weld the two corners that are set against the bucket first, and then I'll try and pull the rest of it down. Probably just flip the bucket around, put some weight on it with the loader. I'll try that, see whatever works, but I'm going to start by welding those two corners. There we go. I've got some weight on it, just on the edge of the bucket, with it set kind of flat like that. And that got that back corner to sit against the bucket pretty well. And this front corner to sit against the bucket pretty well. So I'm going to weld those up, and then I can test it. That worked beautifully. It attaches and detaches really nicely. It's nice and smooth. I did figure out that when I go to full dump, this plate hits the loader arm here. So I'm going to cut a notch, probably just 1/2 inch or so. I'm just going to cut a notch right across there. to give it a little clearance, and then I'll try it again. I've got that notched out now. You can see it just barely touches, which is just fine. Touches right there. It'll self-clearance a little bit, and it's not hitting real hard. That'll be just fine. So I'm confident enough in the way the bucket is set up and that that's going to work, that I'm going to go ahead and do all the welding on it. And then I can take those quick attach pads back off, clean and lube everything up, and probably paint them. And then we're just about done. I also decided not to plug weld it on the back side there. With all this weld, I don't think that's going to be a problem. We've got plenty of strength here. That's probably the strongest connection on the tractor, so I think that'll be just fine. There's it all welded up. Here's the bottom. I didn't weld it all the way across the bottom. I want moisture to be able to get out, and that'll be plenty strong enough. I also didn't do any prep whatsoever on any of these welds. So some of them are pretty ugly, but it's definitely strong enough. Here's the bucket all done and painted up. Welded all the way across there. Pretty good. I'm happy with it. It turned out nice for what it is. The bucket's worn out anyway. The cutting edge is done. And it's all bent up. So that's pretty good. But here's the fun part. Here's the whole reason I did all that work. So I don't know what that much wood weighs. That's a 330-gallon tote cage. And it is at least 3/4 full. Pretty good. I like it. That is every bit that thing will lift. The front tires are squished all the way down. The back end wants to come up without me sitting on it. That is every bit that she'll lift. Here's the coupler, all painted up. Looks pretty good. It fits really nice. It goes on really well, nice and smooth. Had to clean those pins right there that engage the implement. I had to clean them real good and grease them real good to get them moving nice. But that's all working perfect. I did have to drill new holes right here for those bottom pins. If you remember this, well, you can't see it, it's all dark in there, but I had to cut half of the original hole for this bolt off, so I just drilled new holes in there. It just barely fits in between there, which is fine. If I need to take those bolts out and just weld those pins in, no big deal. But I think it's going to work just dandy for now. If you're wondering, no, it was not in any way worth it. That's probably, I don't know, 3 or 4 bucket loads of wood. I could have brought those up from my wood lot a lot quicker. It wasn't worth all the effort, but it's pretty darn cool. I'm really happy with the way it turned out, and I really like the idea that I have the ability to move stuff around with those forks. Obviously, they're not going to lift a whole lot of weight, but I'm still really happy with it. Even though it wasn't worth the work, it was a fun project. I've never done anything quite like that before, so I probably wouldn't do it again, though.